We are the American Legion Department of New Jersey. Be the one.
On with the program. I'm going to talk about some general stuff until everybody is seated and able to attend. I have handouts on the table over there near the door, so everything I'm going to present right now is going to be in the handout. So for that reason, it's a little easier to go a little quicker. It's really a resource. Sure, thank you. Oh, that's even better. Okay, so the handout is a resource for everybody, and you'll be able to see everything that I'm presenting here. I'm going to start and then turn it over to my good friend Mike Callahan here from DCA. I'm Vic Carlson. I'm the Chief of Homeless Services for the VA New Jersey healthcare system, which is Atlantic County and north. The southern tip of New Jersey is split between Delaware and Pennsylvania. And we have the Delaware team up here. What a terrific group of people. Very competent, very skilled in what they do, as you can tell. So let me give the big picture here. As they were saying, HUD-VASH is two acronyms. You know, the government loves their acronyms. So HUD, you know what HUD is, Housing and Urban Development. You heard what VASH is, VA, Supportive Housing. So HUD provides a Section 8 voucher, as they just explained, and the veteran pays 30% of their income. And that's what we're all supposed to do. You know, the amount of money you're supposed to pay toward housing is about 30%. And if they have no income, they pay nothing. But they still have to have some form of support for food and other utilities and so forth. So, you know, we do have to wrap services around folks to make this happen. And there is an income limit. There are going to be veterans that are over income. Right now it's set at 80% of the area median income. So if you are in poverty and you're a veteran, then the HUD-VASH program is available for support in that way. If you make a lot of money, then we're going to save this resource for veterans who are in need. That's what it's focusing on. The supportive housing part, Congress also decided that this precious resource is going to focus on veterans who need case management. Not just every veteran who is in trouble financially. It's not purely a social safety net for financial reasons. It's focusing on the most needy veterans, the ones who have those social service needs that we've been talking about. Okay, so to that end, there are two types of vouchers. There's tenant-based vouchers, where the veteran owns the voucher. They can take it wherever they want in New Jersey. They can even take it throughout the country. And that's a beautiful thing. You know, they get a job, they get married, they want to move somewhere else. The voucher is theirs. They can take it with them. And then there's project-based vouchers. And those vouchers belong to the project, belong to the location. So when the veteran leaves, the voucher stays. And that's certainly a tremendous advantage for the housing developers because they want to have that guaranteed subsidy that ensures that the units are going to be filled. So it's a good thing. And it's also a good thing to build housing in areas where there is inadequate housing. But the downside is it's locked to the program. And if the veteran moves, it's a whole lot more complicated for them to get another voucher in another location. So as of right now, there's 110 project-based vouchers in northern New Jersey on the Lyons campus at Veterans Haven North. We have awarded vouchers to Hoboken and to Union County with the hope that they're able to provide projects to serve veterans in those communities. But for those folks in the room who are thinking about, can we do more of this? Absolutely we can and we should. But we should think about who we're serving, because in exchange for being locked into that building, the veteran should be getting something for that service. It should be, you know, services wrapped around. It should be special populations. The VA nationally had the image of there might be a project that serves people with substance abuse problems or people with serious economic problems. It hasn't really turned out that way. We got projects all over the place, but I think that we need to have a service that is above and beyond the normal tenant-based voucher. Otherwise, why would you want to trade your freedom to be locked into a particular location? So the first consideration is what are we going to provide that makes this unit more attractive for the veteran? The second consideration for me is about size. I think smaller units, smaller groups of veterans living together is far better than a large 75, 100-bed housing project. And We can talk more about that as time goes on. So the units have to be ADA compliant. Access to public transportation and deployment, of course, is very important. So we need to think about the types of units we're going to offer. As far as Housing First, we've been talking a lot about that, and Housing First was revolutionary. In the past, traditionally, people had to jump through all of these hoops in order to get housing. I've been with the VA for 32 years. I know the hoops that everybody used to have to go through, and it was a wonderful thing to be able to go straight to housing and then wrap the services around the people. We've helped so many more people. It's been a tremendous success. We're housing over 1,300 veterans right now, tonight, in northern central New Jersey, in HUD-dash vouchers. And the turnover rate is about 6%, which is about half the target, half the national. New Jersey's doing really great at housing these people and keeping them housed. So Housing First is important, but services right along with that housing is also very important. And the project managers need to be able to follow the fair housing laws with regards to grounds for eviction and stuff. And so the providers need to be prepared for the veterans that they're going to be serving. And I hear it calls from developers saying, I want to build 50 or 100 units for women with children. And I say, if you build it, they won't come, because we don't have 50 women with children who need housing. A small percentage of them are women. It's growing. Mostly single, mostly men, mostly without children. A bit of a shocker, they're mostly older than you might think. 60% are over 60 years old. Only 10% are under 40. And then significant medical and mental health and substance abuse problems. And this is why folks are homeless. This is what we're here to serve. These are the people we're here to serve. But giving them housing is not enough. We need to be there to help them with these problems that led to the homelessness. Otherwise, they're going to be homeless again right out of your project. They're not going to be able to make it unless we provide these services. So, on-site staffing and services is essential. According to the VA, we need to be able to be responsive to whatever problems might occur with the particular veteran. And additionally, the HUD-dash team, their role is to evaluate the veteran. Do they have case management needs? Are they appropriate for the HUD-dash program? And then we provide liaison services for that veteran and all the community providers, particularly HUD, and all the red tape involved in going through the process. There were questions about how long this process takes. Boy, would I love to streamline that process. And I think we all need to work together to streamline the process. Bureaucracy is a tangle, and we need to untangle the bureaucracy. So the VA is there providing case management services. The Public Housing Authority ensures that the facility meets the inspection standards, issues the voucher, as we said, makes the payment, HUD does all of that. The property management team, is maintaining the building, preparing the lease, collecting the rent, those kinds of things. And the on-site service provider is there to provide specific services to manage emergencies, to be there when there's a conflict, when two veterans are getting into an argument that could lead to significant problems. So together, each of these folks, the VA providing the case management, HUD providing the housing, property manager building the project, service providers, working together, that's it. It's the coalitions of the people in this room, each bringing our own creative energy, each showing up for the specific veteran in the specific situation that they're in. That's the key. One size does not fit all. We're here to tailor what we provide to veterans, whatever it takes. And the compassion, the conviction to service among the people is amazing. And so I'm always inspired coming to these presentations and hearing people talk about how much they put into this process. So that's a quick run through. As I said, all of these slides are on the table over there. And I'm going to turn it over to Michael, and then we'll circle back to questions at the end. I think that's probably the best. Okay.
Thanks, Vic. Ooh, clicker. Nice. All right, let me just back out of this real fast. All right, just so by way of introduction, so everybody knows, right? Mike Callahan, Director of Office of Veteran, no, not that. I'm Director of Office of Homelessness Prevention for the state. The Office of Homelessness Prevention, what we do is really have 4 lines of business, right? So while we were originally in the governor's office, we moved to DCA, right? And part of that is, right, we were responsible for, first, all things data science and analytics, having to do with housing insecurity, and also homelessness across the state of New Jersey. Second, right, so my office manages a grant portfolio of right around $163 million right now, everything from the homelessness diversion and some shelter support grants all the way through bringing veterans home, which we're going to talk about in a second. Right? Thirdly, right, we are responsible as the technical assistant agent to work with municipalities to ensure that they have not only plans to help reduce homelessness in their communities, but that they're leveraging all source resourcing, right, to effectuate those exits, right? And so a lot of the stuff that folks have been talking about is, hey, we have these nascent projects, or they're not even nascent, they're just pending a conceptual idea of what they are, right? It's, hey, we want to build housing for homeless veterans in our community, right? Please reach out to myself and my team. I also want to give a shout out to my DCA colleague, right? So Colleen Velez, right? So Colleen, right, is the director of special projects, and she's also the active administrator of the Office of Housing Production in DCA, right? As part of that, when we talk about who actually owns what the process looks like from both a procurement and a project underwriting perspective, right? With the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, the National Housing Trust Fund, the Home Investment Partnership, the Healthy Homes Initiative, and some other special purpose funding projects, right? Colleen's really your point of contact there, right? Colleen's team's fantastic. Prior to coming to us, she worked at CSH, she crushed it there, but she really brings also to that national level understanding of kind of not only what are the best practices, but what are ways that we can push the state. So all that being said, one of the things I'm going to do real quick is kind of pivot over to talk about, right, in this emergent federal and state funding landscape, right, what are we kind of doing? I'm going to give a quick entree into bringing veterans home so folks can kind of socialize that effort a little bit more broadly. I know that the commissioner designate, right, I know that Vincent is going to be up here talking a lot of it about that, so I'm not going to steal his thunder. But as part of that is we are in a space right now where we will most likely, knock on wood, right, functionally end veteran homelessness by summer of next year in New Jersey. Right? Now, yeah, it's a big deal. You should be happy about that, right? We have two key mission partners from a vendor perspective, but one of the things throughout this effort is that we utilize the VA's one team for you, right? We're not doing this as a one-off where the state of New Jersey goes and does its own thing, right? As part of it is we cannot do this without our federal partners, and similarly, our federal partners cannot accomplish mission without us, right? So when we deploy special purpose state funding, it has to be working in concert with, and in alignment with, the resources that the federal government is putting in here, right? And so with VMC and Soldier On, if you're interested in their regions that they own as part of the Bringing Veterans Home project, please get with them, right? We're always looking for more mission partners there, right? So going into the deck, right, and then I'll just go real fast here, right? Right, when we look at bringing veterans home, actually, before we dive into that, I'm just gonna go here real fast. Okay, so if you want, you can go to bbh.dca.nj.gov, right? And so this will bring you to the Bringing Veterans Home website, right? Part of the Bringing Home Veterans website is you will learn everything about what we're doing, right? The dashboard of how many veterans we serve, what have been the precipitating cause of homelessness, right? Where those veterans are located and what that looks like. And then we're also going to be able to showcase here in the coming weeks, right, after the election. Funny how that happens, right? Some additional outcomes data and other things, right? So that if you're using data and you need to make fact-based decisions and working with municipalities on, hey, where are the emergent cells of veteran homelessness throughout the state, right? That you're really targeting that appropriately, where that looks. Similarly, going down here, right, you'll understand the process, what it looks like, the systems map, right, and also to understand who owns what some of these services are attached to what VISN and what VA healthcare system, right? So as we go into what it was making that work is literally what happened was, and what the kernel of all of this was, is that my boss at the time, Lieutenant Governor Sheila Oliver, right, and Janelle Winter, right, my immediate boss, said, hey Mike, could we end veteran homelessness in New Jersey? And I said, well, that's a loaded question. And Vic and I had very vigorous discussions along with our partners at DMAVA on what was possible. And one of the first things was right-sizing the response. And in right-sizing the response, we wanted to see, hey, the VA is making historic investments into veteran homelessness and resolving that veteran homelessness. Let's go and make sure that we are plugging in state dollars where they're going to be most supportive of those efforts. What that was a $30 million initial outlay, right, of that, right? Unfortunately, as we move into the end of the Murphy administration, the budget authority for bringing veterans home ends on the 30th of June next year, right? So that's the end of the state fiscal year, right? When we talk about what we need, and some of the things we're going to talk about, some of the things we're going to talk about from a developmental perspective is, if we have an annual appropriation between 18 to $24 million, we could not only support all the work that the feds are doing, we could also align some of the production of what that looks like along with that so that we can sustain functional zero, right? And when we look at homelessness writ large, right, using longitudinal data, homelessness across the state is up, unsheltered homelessness across the state, this is not just veterans, this is the entirety of the population, it's up 32.1% as of yesterday, right, from last year. When we talk about unsheltered homelessness in the 2-year uptick, right, we are approaching 52.7% 2-year, year-over-year increase. And things are only going to get worse. So understanding the immediacy of meeting the moment and what is taking everybody going to work together, that is where we are, right? But understanding all that, right, with that, what that 18 to $24 million gets us, right, it gets us 800 plus annual leases, right, with supplemental state rental assistance program veteran vouchers, right? It gets us less than a 45-day time to lease, which is fantastic. One of the biggest hallmarks of working with VA on this is we have reduced the amount of time it takes that as a veteran is in housing search, right? It started at 143 days, right? We are at 47 days. We've shaved off, right, more than 3 months of housing search that somebody is sitting in a hotel, that somebody is sitting in a shelter, right? And that's a big deal, and it's a lift of a lot of people. Similarly, what this funding can also quantitatively allow us to do is that recidivism rate that Vic was talking about, right? So we want to make sure that we have greater than 85% 12-month retention in the program, people not exiting the homelessness. And that's really how we get in front of that. So there was a question particularly around, hey, how do we go and access data, right, on not only affordable housing, what it looks like for municipality obligations are, but also too, what are some additional funding streams as well, right? So immediately after this, and I'll make sure I push it out to Jim and Terry and the team to go and send out the QR codes and the links to some of these resources are, this right here is the DCA Affordable Housing Dashboard, right? And one thing I want to talk to you about here is this, the Affordable Housing Trust Funds. So here at the state, we have the State Affordable Housing Trust Fund, right, which Colleen affectionately stewards, right? But part of that is quite a few municipalities in the state of New Jersey have their own municipal affordable housing trust funds. Portions of these dollars can be used in the capital stack that you're going and creating for these new projects, right? And also some of these dollars can also be supportive, right, of vouchers at the municipal level, right? And so one of the great things is when you look at the legislation, so A4S50, which you brought up, right, is that there is a preference that municipalities can have for homeless veterans in their communities using their affordable housing dashboard. Right? So when we look down here, if we go down to the delta, right, that's $529.22 million that municipalities potentially have to help you with your projects. That's outside of the state funds, right? That's a lot of cheddar, folks. All right, and so when we talk about the sustainability of these efforts and where to really dial in, right, this is where you make that happen and effectuate those outcomes very rapidly. Similarly, right, leverage my office, leverage Colleen's office, there's Shah, so Kate Kelly's in the back, right, what is that, Kate, right, so Kate's the executive director of the Supportive Housing Association, there's Ashish from Monarch, I thought I saw John Restrepo here, right, right, there's a bunch of folks in this room, we are more than happy, and your tax dollars pay for us, right, to help work with you in municipalities to do things. All it takes for a municipality to leverage some of these dollars for those municipal vouchers is an amendment to their fair share housing settlement plan. We can work with those town professionals and other folks that have to be in the sauce for that to go and make that happen. Similarly, right, as part of this is guess who is the person who signs off on if a homeless plan is aligned with the state plan? Hi, I'm Alan. How are you? Right? And guess who the second person approves? Hi, Colleen. And then our boss signs off. Right? But that's where we're at. Just more broadly and speaking about it from a data perspective, right? If you go to datahub.dca.nj.gov, right, this is where all these data are, right? These are where all these data sets are, right? One of the things is if you're here and you're kind of in the homelessness space at large, you know that we're having an all-state call between DHS and DCA on Thursday where we're going to talk about some of the impending federal cuts and what that looks like and how that's going to be operationalized here in the state, right? But when we're talking about having a fact-based conversation with municipalities, but also to level setting with that team that you're building, right? You want to ensure that you're having the latest data and that you're going and accessing what you need in one central place, right? This really is the space for that. The last thing, and I just want to be cognizant of time, is the keynote, which is fantastic, right? Talked about the impending criminalization of homelessness, right? Last night, I was at a Newton Town Council meeting. It's almost 9 o'clock last night, right? And part of the function of my office is to partner with municipality to prevent at all costs the criminalization of homelessness, right? That town council has leaned in and said, not only do we find unsheltered homelessness unacceptable, we're going to work diligently to make sure that it is ended in our town, right? And that goes beyond politics, that goes beyond who's there, right? They're coming from a place of compassion, and I will do my utmost, along with our whole team at DCA, to make sure that our towns have the mechanisms by which to make that happen, right? So if you go to njledge.state.nj.us, right? It's a good resource just to look at bills and everything that's there. It's also another good resource if you look at, when I say A4 S50, right? That is the state's affordable housing legislation. When we talk about what are the use cases for municipal housing trust fund dollars, what are the preferences for veterans in municipalities as they come up with their fair share of plan obligations and they do their affordable housing calculations, right? It's all baked into that bill, right? It's available via Justia or the Cornell site as well, but here at New Jersey Light, you can go and see the iterations of that. Similarly, from here there's one bill that I want to highlight, and then we're going to open it up for questions, right? Just bear with me 1 second, right? So if we look at, right, S 1083, right? This is the Homeless Bill of Rights, right? So the Homelessness Bill of Rights, the primary sponsor is Senator Timberlake, right? Senator Timberlake is one of the greatest champions for homelessness in the state of New Jersey, right? This is the bill that is going to receive action here in the lame duck session to help prevent the criminalization of homelessness across the state of New Jersey, right? There's some fantastic stuff here, but all of you as advocates, all of you as service providers, and all of you as interested persons need to weigh in on this and say why it is so incredibly necessary in the environment we're in. There's an identical bill number, right, which Reginald Atkins, right, who's fantastic, he's out of Legislative District 20, right, is also sponsoring on this, right? And we really talk about, right, what is the state framework to make sure that criminalization doesn't happen? It's here, but also as advocates, you also want to make sure that when we talk about housing production, we talk about deploying HUD-VASH vouchers, where that is, making sure that just because somebody has a HUD-VASH voucher does not mean that landlords are not going to discriminate, right? And how do we leverage some of the additional state tools, but also to further resourcing so that homeless veteran isn't discriminated in the housing search, right? There's a lot baked into this, and I'm not going to go into it, but I just wanted to make you aware, right? Lastly, right, as part of this is, running down to this slide, right, because we got about 1 minute, right, is particularly when we talk about with bringing veterans home, what a good change could be, right? There's a fix to the state rental assistance program that could help project-base some of those costs. Similarly, we could tie through the New Jersey Family Care Housing Supports Program, right, which is if you're eligible for Medicaid in New Jersey, guess what? You're eligible for longitudinal case management services through the tenancy sustainment services of that, right? Say you have a veteran that's not eligible for HUD-VASH because VIC can't hire 900 HUD-VASH workers, right? But guess what? There's different providers that can hire for that, and they can pair that. Guess what happens when you're working with a municipality to go and meet their affordable housing obligation, right? If you're building a project to help if you have 4 units to help homeless veterans, right? And that's what it is. You've got the vouchers lined up, you've got everything else. If you pair those case management services with that project, that town gets a 50% bonus for every unit. So that 1 unit of affordable housing is actually worth 1.5 units to that town, right? So that makes the value proposition when you're working with a municipality that much stronger to say, hey, not only are we going to help the homeless and leverage this affordable housing to do so, but we're going to prioritize homeless veterans. And that's what really gets to the finish line, right? So we said a lot. I think we'll go ahead and take it around to questions. I'll run around with this and moderate.
Yeah, sure. You take that mic, are you available?
All right, so I'm going to run around so you can hear questions. Sure.
What's the criteria for just give the tenants a voucher?
Yeah, so Vic, do you want to talk about just the regular HUD-VASH qualification process and what that looks like?
Well, certainly, first and foremost, the issue about homelessness. If somebody has an apartment, a Section 8 apartment, they'd like to move into a different place, I don't necessarily want to prioritize that person. I want to prioritize the street homeless person, the person who has no place to live. And so it makes perfect sense that we're going to prioritize homelessness and not trading up to a better apartment or a cheaper apartment. And the second thing is income. There are income requirements, as we said before, 80% of the median family income for that area. And then the need for case management. So all of those things factor in terms of who qualifies for the voucher.
Is there a lot of tenant-based vouchers?
Right now, there's only 110 in my catchment area, and but we have several more in the pipeline.
And importantly, too, like with SRAP, right, with bringing veterans home, right, we have right around 540 SRAP vouchers that are tied to that. We have a little bit north of 600 home TBRA vouchers, which are 12 to 24 month, right, and they meet that 80% AMI criteria. But then we also have rapid rehousing, right, and whether that's SSVF rapid rehousing, whether that's bringing veterans home rapid rehousing, or just a diversion payment, right, there's tiers of additional income eligibility from that, and really what it is it's graduated assistance that meets the need with the expectation of, hey, like I say this as Army veteran, the combat Army veteran that has a 70% disability, right, is that if I were in HUD-VASH, command, even though I transitioned out of a warrior transition unit, did the step-down care, did all of that when I left the military, right, a lot of those services that I need once I transition, I only needed for 2 years, right? So me being able to go and say, hey, I have a reasonable prospect of increasing my own income, right? That really helps me as well, right? To go and say, hey, I'm graduating over the program, I'm self-sufficient, I'm able to go. And that's why in the totality of mix, as we deploy this, we want to make sure there's all avenues of that, not just concentrating in one separate pocket. That was a really awesome question. Who's next? Sure, I'm gonna run over here.
When is our stop time? Can anybody tell me?
5 more minutes.
5 more minutes. Okay.
Is there anything that would prevent somebody from getting a VASH voucher, such as criminal background, certain criminal offenses?
Right now, the legislation had disqualified nationally registered sex offenders, so they did that. But beyond that, I don't know that there are other criminal restrictions. No, I'm told that there are not.
Yeah, so particularly with that is, one of the things with bringing veterans home, right, is our rapid rehousing program can support people who are Megan's law registrants, right, that are veterans. It's a very small population, right, but oftentimes when we talk about chronicity and acuity, that's one of the highest populations, right? Really good question. Next, Rouse.
So bring veterans home, correct me if I'm wrong, they won't take it back conduct.
Right. So importantly, right, sure, right, so bringing veterans home, we can take a VCD on case by case, and it has to be approval of TMAPA, right, for that. But there is the dishonorable discharge qualifier, right, for all programs there. That's a really good.
Okay, the other question I have is DCA sent out a letter to landlords recently about not being able to raise rent for the unknown future. Does that also apply to the vouchers that veterans get?
Okay, very good question. All right, so importantly, right, one of the real limiting factors that we're looking at across the state, right, is we're going to be when you flat fund a public housing authority, that is effectively a cut, right? Is with the letter that DCA sent out, right, what happens is you have quickly compounding diminishing returns for all of your total voucher portfolio as those rental rates increase, right? I can tell you right now that with the almost 30,000 vouchers that DCA administers, right, In 3 years, that would get cut down to 26,500 vouchers just by those rental increases, right? And so it's a really key point for advocacy at the federal level with some of the cuts that are proposed at PIH. So PIH is Public and Indian Housing. That's where a lot of the funding for federal vouchers come from. But also too with the state legislature, right? To go and say, hey, our landlords need to be supported. They are working with us on this. They need a fair shake. But that also means that the public housing authorities, and also DCA as the administrator of SREP, needs to have the budgetary authority to increase those. So our vouchers are getting the mileage they need, and we're making the community impacts we can. Then how much time we have left there?
Just a couple minutes. Maybe one more question? Or a clarification?
I was just saying it too.
Oh, sorry.
All right, 2 minutes. Any last questions?
We put a New Jersey vet to vet on this,
Oh, yeah, sure.
the New Jersey vet to vet is not on there, it's one of the big cities that.
Is that an SSVF program?
Oh, no, it's so Vet to Vet is the state PBH hotline for that. So importantly, with so there's the VA's National Homelessness Hotline that the panel prior to talked about, right? One of the great things is part of our partnership with Rutgers and UBHC is they are the operators of the Vet to Vet hotline, right? If you want to direct dial to some of the Bringing Veterans Home programming we talked about, that is the main mechanism for that, right? And I will go ahead and throw that up here in a second.
Very important resource, thank you.
Anything else? Since we got 1 more minute left.
I'm from Demapa. We brought flyers
Oh,
about
great.
bringing veterans home, so if anybody wants these flyers, they have a QR code, you can, okay, you
We
want
also
them
have
too?
some here.
Yeah, so if anybody wants them, there's a lot of information.
Awesome. And also too, you have two providers of the program here as well. If you need to connect them in more granular level.
Very last question, we're moving quickly in order to try to get back on track.
Housing First funding seems to be under attack by the federal government. What's our fallback position on that?
Well, that's.
Do you want me to take that one?
I'll start and then you follow up. I'm saying that what we provide is not strictly housing first. What HUD-NASH is housing plus case management. What I think the pushback nationally is just giving somebody a house with no services is not an effective strategy for a lot of people. I think we need to match the services with the housing. So I'm in agreement, let's add. But it's housing first and services right along with it. You know, so it's a bit of hair splitting now in terms of the language that we're using. But when you're advocating for these situations, say, this is not just the traditional housing first where give somebody a house and forget about it. This is housing first and be there with that person to help them keep that house. Very important.
And as part of that too is that the Department of Community Affairs is a housing first agency, right? So our Commissioner Jacqueline Suarez, our Assistant Commissioner Janelle Winter, right? Everybody, you don't get hired at DCA unless you full freight buy into the philosophy of housing first. The bill that I put up there, right, that the Homelessness Bill of Rights, that codifies New Jersey as a housing first state. And that's very important, right? Because that means that by law, right, we will work on doing business this way, irrespective of how the political winds shift. That's incredibly important right now if we're talking about functionally ending veteran homelessness and sustainability. Really good question.
Okay, I thank you all. We'll be available throughout lunch and during breaks, so please step up and we invite questions. Thank you all.
Thank you.
We are the American Legion Department of New Jersey. Be the one.